Hi, everyone. My name is Josh, and I'm one of the pastors. Welcome this week to our series that we're continuing, When Life Goes Sideways. You know, every year we celebrate Good Friday and Easter, but often we stop right there with those stories, don't we? We don't necessarily follow the stories of those early followers of Jesus to really how they processed the trauma, what it meant to them to lose Jesus in such a traumatic way, and really how they were able to get to that next season of life in starting this new movement of what it meant to follow Jesus, being a Christian or a Christ follower. And we're talking about this season of their life through the lens of order, disorder, and reorder. And we can see in their stories that even in the midst of their hurt, even in the midst of their pain, and in their trauma, God joins with them. God is not apart from them, but he enters into this disorder and together leads them toward reorder, leads them toward something new. Okay, I want to tell you a story of an unfortunate nickname that I had growing up. When I was growing up, I've told you before that my dad was a pastor. And for many of our years growing up, we lived in the church parsonage. Now, if you didn't grow up going to church, you may not know what that is. The parsonage is just a house that's owned by the church. It's often right beside the church, and it's in this prominent place in the community, in the neighborhood. It's like living in a glass house, really, because everything that the pastor's family does seems to be on display for everyone. As a kid growing up, every time I played football in the front yard or rode my bike or shot baskets, in the basketball hoop, it seemed like everybody was watching. I remember one time my mom actually tilled up the front lawn of the church parsonage and planted a garden. Man, that made the neighbors talk. Well, there was this one particular neighbor that whenever I would ride by his house, he was about my age, he would look at me and he would say in this kind of mocking tone, he'd say, "Hey, church boy." And I'd be on my bike thinking, "Oh man, church boy, I want to be just one of the regular guys. I wanted to be seen as just cool. And I was riding my BMX bike and I didn't want to be seen as the goody-goody, church boy." I don't know about you. Did you ever have a nickname that just seemed to point out some part of your life that you would just rather not be, the thing that everyone notices? How did that make you feel when you had that nickname? Well, the story that we're going to look at today, this follower of Jesus, has one of those names, unfortunately for him. And I bet that you know who it is. I'm going to say his name, and you say his nickname. Ready? It's Thomas. What is Thomas known as? I can hear you. I can hear you through the screen there. Yes, he's known as Doubting Thomas. It's like, rah, rah. Here's the story of this original follower of Jesus. He was one of the 12 disciples, and he's known as the doubter. Man, that sounds kind of unfortunate to me. It doesn't sound like something that I'd want to be remembered for. And, I think about that. Why is doubt such a bad trait? Why is it seen as that in our culture? Well, doubt is often associated with unbelief, isn't it? When someone doubts something, or especially if they doubt their faith, this can feel really negative. It can feel dangerous even, like they're slipping away from the shores of what is sure and true. So the nickname, Doubting Thomas, does it really adequately describe this disciple of Jesus? Well, I like what N.T. Wright tells us about Thomas. He calls Thomas this. He said, Thomas is one of John's great minor characters. He's talking about the Apostle John, which is the scripture we're going to look at today. We find that Thomas is loyal. He's dogged. He's slow to understand things, but he's determined to go on putting one foot in front of the other at Jesus' command. Well, what gives this theologian N.T. Wright this picture of Thomas? Where did he get this idea about Thomas? Because what I know about Thomas is that he is doubting Thomas. Well, actually, the first time we meet Thomas is actually in John chapter 11. And if you've been around church at all, you've probably heard the story of Lazarus. This is Jesus' friend who Jesus raises from the dead after 3 days. Pretty dramatic story. And if you know that, there's actually a verse in John 11 that's one of the most famous verses, especially if you grew up in church as a kid and you were forced to memorize the Bible and you had to have a verse always ready to memorize. I memorized John 11:35. It's Jesus wept. 2 words. I just always love to memorize that. Not necessarily because Jesus was, compassionate and showed compassion, but just because it was 2 words. Well, is that what John 11 and Thomas is all about? Well, actually, there's another verse in this chapter where Thomas is involved. In fact, he speaks. It's John 11:16, and it says this: "Then Thomas said to the rest of the disciples, 'Let us also go, that we may die with him.'" And when you just hear that verse out of context, I don't know what that's talking about. In fact, it sparks some curiosity in me to know what is Thomas referring to. Well, let me tell you kind of the rest of the story. You see, in the previous chapter, in John chapter 10, we find Jesus and his disciples traveling through the country, and Jesus is teaching, and he's specifically teaching that he is come to be the Son of God. And he says that I have come from God. I am God's Son. And this angers the crowd. In fact, angers them to a point that they pick up stones and they want to throw them at Jesus and the disciples and commit this incredible act of violence. Somehow, they were able to escape. So this is the area of the country that Jesus and his disciples were in. They had escaped there, and when Jesus hears that his friend Lazarus is dying, he wants to go back to that same part of the country because that's where Lazarus was from. And his disciples, how do you think they felt about that? Well, they thought, "Oh man, we do not want to go back there, Jesus. Don't you remember what happened?" It's this difficult choice that they have to make. Do we go and we visit the sick friend, or do we protect ourselves and stay back? Well, Jesus is ready to go, and the disciples are trying to talk him out of it. In fact, the first part of chapter 11 is all about that. They say, "Hey, Jesus, a short time ago, these people were ready to stone you, and now you want to go back there? This seems like a pretty reasonable and thoughtful thing to think. It seems like regular logic to me." And they can't talk Jesus out of it. He's determined to go back, whether there's going to be a stoning or not. And into that scene, Thomas resigns himself to, I'm going to go with Jesus, and no matter what happens, I'm committed to following you, Jesus. He doesn't understand all of what Jesus is saying or doing, but he's following the person. He's loyal. He wants to be that person who's seen as a good follower, a good disciple. And that to me shows me that Thomas he's just a straight up good guy. He's all in. He's ready to die if necessary. It's the kind of guy that you really want to be on your team, don't you? You want people to be loyal. You want people to be ready to go to whatever it takes. When I see this picture of Thomas, does it seem like a guy who's unsure? Does it seem like a guy who is, doesn't trust in Jesus, or that is ruled by fear? Does it seem like a guy whose nickname should be Doubting Thomas? It certainly doesn't seem like so to me. In fact, when I'm introduced to this version of Thomas, I think to myself, what is it here in Thomas's story that I can relate to? What about you? What do you see in Thomas's story here in John 11? Do you relate to his quality of loyalty? Do you relate to his willingness to go with Jesus no matter what? Maybe you relate to the part of the story where the disciples are scared and they're fearing what's going to happen with Jesus, and they have this very logical argument. Let's not go back there. Thomas is a pretty relatable character, isn't he, when we look at him in that first story. But let's look at the next story, the story that he's most famous for. It's found in John chapter 20. Now Thomas, who was also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." Now, you may be curious to know, or curious to think, why wasn't Thomas with the rest of the disciples when Jesus first came? I definitely had that question. I felt like Thomas kind of missed out here, and we don't know the reason why he wasn't there, but for some reason he wasn't, and so he didn't see what they saw. He didn't see Jesus that first time. And let's face it, if you were in that situation and your friends showed up and they were telling you that your friend who had died was up and breathing again, you might be a little bit skeptical. You might think, "Hey, guys, what have you been drinking? What have you been smoking here? I'm not sure I'm believing what you're saying, and I need some proof. I need some proof here." And that has happened in my life. When life goes sideways for me at times, it initiates this season of grief in my life. You're familiar with those different seasons of grief where you go through denial and anger and depression and bargaining. Well, doubt also is something that is woven into that grief journey. You may be doubting your future when you're in that season of disorder. You may be thinking, I just don't trust that things are going to work out, that they're not going to go back to that way that they were. And that's doubt right there. Or maybe you've experienced this way. Maybe you've been with someone that you really care about deeply, but yet they hurt you very badly to a place where you're just not sure that you can trust them again. You don't know if you believe that person will be something different because it doesn't match your experience of what's happened. And that's doubt. And I want to say this about doubt and kind of normalize Thomas's experience, is that doubt is really a natural reaction to disorder. It's really a natural part of when things go sideways. And when I see doubt in this way, it really normalizes Thomas and his experience for me. His skepticism is not necessarily a statement of disbelief. It's more related to this season of grief and this trauma that he's experienced in his life of losing Jesus. And perhaps his disbelief is also in the idea that, hey, people who die, they don't come back to life again. This does not happen. This is not part of my normal experience of what I've experienced. And that's doubt. So doubt is a natural thing for us to experience when we're going through disorder. Well, let's continue on with the story. So a week later, Scripture says, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. So a week has gone by. And I just want us to slow down here and think about what that's like when the time when Thomas's friends tell him that Jesus is somehow living again, and it's been a week. Boy, that is like the middle of uncertainty. It definitely feels like when you're in the middle of a disorder, it can feel like time is just creeping by so slowly. I think of stories that I've heard of friends who have gone through a long divorce process. Boy, that thing can get spread out to where it just feels just discouraging. Or perhaps you've been with someone who's just had a long illness and you're hoping for something better, but the illness keeps getting worse. Or I think about that thing that we can all relate to, that when we have a medical test that we're waiting for the results for, when you're waiting for that doctor to call you back, that can just feel like an eternity. And I think that's a little bit about what's happening perhaps in Thomas's life during that one week that is he's waiting to see if what the other disciples had said was true. And your mind can make up all kinds of stories during that time, can't it? You want to know what's going to happen. You want to know what's certain. And so in this type of situation, doubt sometimes can feel like there's an absence of faith. And you kind of lose your faith. And doubt is seen as the opposite of that. I love this quote, though, from Anne Lamott, who is just a great writer and deals with things of faith. She says this about this idea. The opposite of faith is not doubt, but certainty. And certainty is missing the point entirely when we're looking for that. Faith includes noticing the mess, the emptiness, and the discomfort, and letting it be there until some light returns. You know, when I see doubt in this way, even in the seasons of uncertainty, I can see it this way. Doubt can be a doorway that leads toward faith. It's not the opposite of faith, but actually it's a doorway that can lead me into faith. And looking at doubt in this perspective actually casts the idea of doubt in a new light for me. I can see it not as the enemy, but as a friend, part of the journey, part of the process of leading me towards something new, toward that place of reorder, we call it. You know, I think about, we see this version of doubt really in science. Anyone who really loves to geek out about science, you know that doubt is an important part of the process. You are asking those questions to see if, to try to explore a new understanding of the natural world. Looking for patterns, looking for a productive conversation, for a better understanding or something new. That's an illustration of where doubt actually is a good thing. You know, it leads us into, when we see doubt in that way, it leads us to a more hopeful direction. So let's see where this goes in the story. Looking back at the scriptures, in John 20 it says, though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. Then he said to Thomas, put your finger here, see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side, and stop doubting and believe. And Thomas said to him, my Lord and my God. You know what I notice here is that Jesus walks into the room where Thomas is, and he doesn't condemn Thomas. He greets everyone with a statement of peace. Peace be with you, even to those who are in this wrestling with their doubt. Instead of chastising Thomas, he invites Thomas closer. He says, here's my hands. I want you to see the scars here. Here's my side. It's this invitation to touch. It's this invitation to really believe and to let go of doubt. You know, Thomas's response, my Lord and my God, it's not some dramatic theological, articulate profession of faith. It's just a realization of a real reality, of a new reality, to actually exclaim, wow, it really is true. Man, what would it be like to follow a God who doesn't condemn your doubt, but engages with you in it? You know, here's something else I see, that when Jesus appears to Thomas, his scars are there. He shows him his hand. He shows him his side. Jesus' new body, his reordered self, it contains the marks of the trauma that he went through. The disorder is part of the reorder. It's part of the story. But there's something there that's different. It's healed. And you know, our reorder is not necessarily the absence of scars. That's kind of what I see here happening in the interaction here with Jesus and Thomas. It was evidence of what Jesus had been through. You know, when you think of your own season of disorder, whatever that is that you've attached to in your life as we've been going through this series, what marks has that season left on you? What wounds are evident from those emotional scars, or maybe physical scars, whatever it is that you've gone through? What is there? What is it? Perhaps you're seeing within those scars some healing. You know, as you've allowed God into those places to come alongside you and to enter into that disorder, you see the healing that's happening, and it actually is still there, but it's part of the reorder. You know, this brings me hope because honestly, I'm like Thomas in many ways. Doubt has definitely been a part of my story. There's been a season of my life where doubt was seen as the enemy, that I had to somehow just remove the doubt myself or get rid of it. And that was, any doubt was this, showed that there was no faith there. But the more I tried to do that, the more it really went in the wrong direction for me. The more I embraced the doubt and asked the questions and tested those things, actually that's where God met me in those places and encouraged me in my faith. And my faith grew into a reordered place, a place that was really stronger and more sure and more certain in that way. This journey of order and disorder and reorder is really very personal to all of us. We all go through it as human beings. We see that this order and this disorder and the reorder, we see it in all around us in life, don't we? And we see it in the lives of these followers, especially in Thomas. And doubt is part of that. Doubt is part of that. And it's like a friend that we can actually see that is leading us into a new place. And I'm just thinking that, like Thomas experienced here, that Jesus is inviting us through this story to connect with God, even in those seasons of doubt. So this week I was really inspired by a story about a man named Giles Dudley. Giles is a photographer, and he's had different jobs over his career. He started out as photographing rock stars. And so he has all these litany of famous people that he's taken pictures of. But that season of his life started to feel empty to him. And so he started wondering, maybe this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. He went into that season of doubt, and doubt became this natural part of his life that really led him into the next part of his career, which was he decided he wanted to take pictures of people that were really suffering, that were going through conflicts, specifically different areas of the world that were going through war. He wanted to take pictures of civilians and the effects of war and what that did upon them and upon their physical bodies and upon their stories. And he began to tell those stories. In fact, in 2011, he found himself with a group of soldiers, and he was taking pictures of their experience when he stepped on a landmine. That experience, of course, changed his life forever. That he lost his arm in that accident and both of his legs. And he went into the next 3 years of just surgery after surgery, trying to recover from his injuries. And during that time, people told him, you know what, you're never going to walk again. You're never going to be able to take pictures again. Your hand, the one hand that you still have, is so badly damaged. And he had so many surgeries just in that one hand. But Giles didn't, even though he says he went through really great seasons of doubt and even depression during that time, he just kept moving on, even seeing that as a vehicle to spur him on to something new. And sure enough, after 3 years of recovery, he was able to walk again. He was able to take pictures again and continue this work that he had started, taking pictures of people, telling their stories through photography. And today, he still is continuing this journey of inspiring others to a life of meaning and joy. He goes by the moniker the one-armed chef. And what he does is he travels to places where people have to use the food that grows around them, what's available in their natural surroundings. And he lives to inspire others to see what they can do with just what's around them, no matter their situation, to enjoy life and make it better for others. And I see this pattern that we've been talking about lived out in Giles's life. This idea that doubt's a natural part and that it can be a doorway to something new. And really, the most powerful part of Giles's story is really this picture right here. This picture of him is a self-portrait he took of himself after the many surgeries. And you can see that the scars are evident. It's a part of his journey, a part of his story, that his new life is still not without the scars of the old. It's taking all of it, his order, his disorder, and it's made something new into reorder. And so I don't know in your life what kind of disorder situation you're experiencing, but I'm inviting you this week to see doubt as a part of the process of your life, as part of the process leading you into something new. I don't know what scars that you have that maybe you're not really proud of those scars, or you don't really like those. You would rather them not be there. But is it possible to even see them as leading toward a place of healing, to be part of your story, part of the reorder of your transformation of what really God is doing? And to see the story of Thomas, to see a man who he was that loyal human being who just loved Jesus, went through all of this trauma, but Jesus met him in that and led him in to some place new. That's a really hopeful story for me. And I hope that in your life, that you can see God working in your life in that way as well. I'd love to hear from you the different ways that this series of sermons is really attaching to your story. How are you seeing this process of order and disorder and reorder work its way in your life? What stories do you see happening in your life that are leading you, that God is meeting you and leading you into this new way? We'd love to hear from you, so reach out to us. Hey, let me say a prayer of blessing over you this week. God, thank you for meeting us in this season of order, disorder, reorder. These things that we're talking about, they're so deeply personal, this pattern of transformation that you're doing in our lives. God, we have seen it in the life of Thomas, and specifically this idea of doubt. God, would you meet us in those seasons of doubt? Would you meet us with a sense of compassion and love, just like you met Thomas that day, and a sense of peace to us, that we might see a new reality being formed in the healing of our own lives. We love you, God, and we know that you love us. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks for joining us this week. We'll see you next time.